Tov, today's Daf Yomi is Bava Metzia Kuf Yodalad, Bava Metzia 114. Today's Daf Yomi is dedicated for a Shemira for the Chayalim, Hatzalah for the Shvuyim, Yeshua for Am Yisrael in this Eis Tzara. So the Daf Yomi, starting on the second line of 114a, asks the question: Yivayilu Ma'ushe Yisadru B'Balchov. Do you have to give the borrower, somebody borrows money from you? Do you have to give him a payment plan, meaning to say, can you take all his money right away, or do you have to leave him with some of the basic necessities of life so that he can pay you back with a little bit of dignity? So the Gemara had previously discussed this on 113, and it sounds like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says you don't have to, and the Chum say you do. And the pashtus of the way to read this sugya is that the Gemara is saying, how do we rule on this case? And the Gemara is saying, Ma'oshe Yisajib Balchov. Migam or micha mi erchen olo. Do we learn it out from the laws of erchen or not? So erchen is if a person uses a very specific way of donating money to the temple. He says erech alai. I'm going to give my erech to the temple, and the Torah gives a specific amount about depending upon your gender, depending upon your age, how much you have to give. But if you can't afford to give it, then we do an evaluation. And then we basically renegotiate what you have to pay. And you never have to pay the parts that you weren't able to pay at the beginning. That's called Hasagas Yad, Rashi says. And that's written a special law by Erchen. So do we learn out Misadrin by a Baal Chov from the laws of Erchen? Do we say, just like we say this law by Erchen, we say by Baal Chov, or not? So Gemara says Tashma. Let's learn this out from a brayso. The Shoch Ravin be Garte. Ravin once sent a letter. Davar zeh sha'alti l'kol rabosai. Says, I asked this question for all my teachers. V'lo amrui davar. They didn't tell me whether or not you need to. But baram kachai sashelo. But they said that this was the question. Haomer harei alai manel abedek. Somebody says, makes a vow to the temple, but it's not the same language as an erech vow. Here he says, I'm just giving $100 to the bedek habayis, to the temple. Mahu, what will be the case? Sheyisaju, do we give him a payment plan? And in that case, so Rabbi Yaakov Mishmei bar Pada, Rabbi Yirmiyah Mishmei de Olfa. So Rabbi Yaakov, it says in the name of our Pada, and Rabbi Yirmiyah says in the name of Ilfa Amri that we say Kal v'chomer. We're going to prove that this is a logical argument mibalcho from a creditor. And what's the logical argument from a creditor? We say the following: Ma bezdin, just like in the case of a bezdin, shemach zirin, that they force you to return the security that you have taken in order to guarantee the loan when the person hasn't been able to pay it back. And a misadrin, but yet we don't do misadrin, we don't do a payment plan by a creditor, but we don't do a payment plan by a creditor. Hektish, sheimachzir, in a case of hektish, where we don't force, if you owe the money, if you owe the temple money, we don't force the temple to return the security to you. Eino din sheim misajin. For sure, by a case of hektish, we do not do misajin, and we let them take everything without giving you a payment plan. So this proves, but from the basis of this letter that Ravin sent, it proves that by Baal Chov, a misajin, that we don't do this payment plan by a borrower. Rabbi Yochanan said, no. Rabbi Yochanan argues with Ilfa. Of course, we know the famous sugya where in Mesechas Tainus, Rabbi Yochanan and Ilfa were going together. Ilfa went into business. So Ilfa says, a misajin, we don't give the borrower the break. Rabbi Yochanan says we do, because Rabbi Yochanan says Nadar be'erkecha ksiv, that neder is written by erkecha. That it says with respect to erech, it says in the pasuk ki ishki afui neder be'erkecha. And so, what's the implication of that verse? Ma erechin misadrin, just like erechin, we make a Sidor, so we do a payment plan. Av hektish misajin, so too by hektish we do this payment plan. The idach and so basically again the morning house. So we're 114a, around 10 lines from the top. Again, what have we seen so far? We've seen that the Gemara is asking the question. When the lender comes to the borrower and says, "Give me back my money," the borrower says, "I don't have it." Are we misogyn? Do we make a payment plan? And the basic question is, do we force the lender to give the borrower a payment plan, leaving him the basic necessities of life? Now, or do we compare it to Erechin or not? By Erechin, we do this payment plan. So the first opinion, Rava says that Ilfa says that we, just like we don't do a payment plan that the question was really about Bedek Abai as a general vow. And there we said, just like we don't do a payment plan by a borrower, so too we don't do it by a Bedek Abayis. So we see that by a borrower, we don't force the payment plan. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan says, no, we do, because we learn it out from Erechin directly. Af hektish misajin. So Rabbi Yochanan says we do this by Bedek Abayis. He doesn't say directly whether or not we do it by case of the Baal Chov, but the implication is we would. So the idach, and how would Ilfa learn out this law of neder berkacha? So what would he do with it? The idach, what he would do with it is he would say, when it says neder berkacha, it's to teach us this law. It's to teach us this law that of nidom bechvodo, which means that if you take a vow and say, I'm going to give the erech of my heart to the temple, since you can't live without your heart, we view it as though you made an erech of your whole body. And we say that law by erech, and we also say it by bedek abayis. So now the Gemara says, wait 1 second. The isaju b'bachol, we should say we should do misaj, and we give the payment plan to the borrower. Kal v'chomer me erechin. Why can't we learn it out by a logical argument from erechin? Ma erechin she'im machzir. Just like in a case of erechin, if the person has to give a security to the temple doesn't have to return the security to him. Misadrin the balchov shemachzirin shemachzir misadrin, but by erechin we do a misadrin. We do a payment plan, even though we don't have to return the security that we take from him. Balchov shemachzir and balchov, where there's a specific law from the Torah that if you take a security, you have to return it. Eino din shemisajrin. For sure, it should be the case that there's misajrin by a borrower. Amar Kra, the pasuk says, no, we don't learn out this kal v'chomer. It says ve'imachu me'arkacha hu v'lo bachov. So maybe there's a pasuk because the pasuk says if he is too poor to pay off his erech vow, him but not the borrower. The idach, whereas the one Rabbi Yochanan that would say that you do need to pay off the misajin by a borrower. What would he would say? Hi ad b'makusa mitzchilo selvat sofa. No, when do we do the misajin by a balchov? Not Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, who says that you are misajin by a borrower, what does he say? The machu me'arkacha by erech vow. What does he say it means? Until you remain in your poverty from the beginning until the end. So the Gemara says, but wait, another teaching, the yachziru behektish b'kal v'chomer, just like the Torah commands us, and we have to return the security that we take when the borrower can't repay the loan. We should also say that the hektish has to return the security it takes from us when we can't pay the vow to the hektish. Kal v'chomer and balchov, we should learn out from a borrower. Ma balchov she'im misajin, just like a borrower that is not necessarily according to the position of the ilfa, that we are not misajin, we don't do a payment plan by a borrower, but machzir, but yet we have to return the security. Hektish, in the case of hektish, misajin by erchin, where we are misader, Eino din shemachzirim, for sure they should have to return the security. Amakrav v'shachav v'salmaso uveirachachad, and that way you're supposed to return the security so he could sleep with his garment, i.e., with the security you took, and then he will bless you, which excludes hektish. Yatsa hektish shein tzarach bracha. This excludes hektish, which hektish doesn't need your bracha. God doesn't need our bracha. The lows, and Gemara says, what do you mean hektish doesn't need a bracha? It says you have to bless that. You have to bless Hashem 100 times a day. Where we bless Hashem, we're about to say the mea brachos. We're about to say the brachos. So they have a whole masechta. It's called masechtas brachos. What do you mean we don't have to bless? Ela makra. Okay, the pasuk says no. The reason why you don't have to return the security is because the pasuk says the reason why hektish doesn't have to return the security. It says that when you return the security, will be a charity for you. Misha tzarach tzedakah means to say that the one who needs charity has to return the security. Hektish doesn't need to give charity, and so therefore it doesn't need to return the security. So the Gemara has basically recorded a dispute between Elfa and Rabbi Yochanan. The two chavrusas, one went into business, one went into Torah study from the Gemara in Tainus, and now the Gemara about whether or not you're obligated to give the borrower a payment plan if he can't pay you back all at once. And now the Gemara has not decided that question. So the Gemara tells a story where Ashkecha Rabbi Baravuha Eliyahu Tikaiva Beisak Farosh of the Chavim. That Rabbi Baravuha found Eliyahu where he's standing in the cemetery of the idolaters. Now, and he wants to ask him, and he's going to ask him three questions. Now, we would expect perhaps Eliyahu Navi throughout the Shas. We have so many times where we say Teku, and that Teku stands for Tishbi Yitari. That Eliyahu Navi will answer. So there's so many questions unresolved that we want Eliyahu Navi to answer these questions. So finally, Rabbi Baravua meets Eliyahu. We expect him to ask him one of those questions. What's the question he asks Eliyahu Navi? You have one question. This is your moment. And what does he ask him? He asks him this question: does the lender is required to give the borrower a payment plan? We see from here the importance of this question, and we'll see Eliyahu Hanavi's answer. He was standing in the cemetery of the idolaters. Why was he standing there? Maybe because it says Eliyahu was a Kohen, as we'll see. He couldn't go to a Jewish cemetery, but it says in Koheles, you're better off to go to the house of a mourner. So we wanted to maybe feel the presence of the dead in order to be humbled. So you have to give the borrower a payment plan. We learned out from Erchin. Meaning say, yeah. Eliyahu Navi says you do have to give him a payment plan. You're required to. So that's how Eliyahu Navi paskins. The next question on top of Kuf Yudalad Amabeis, how do we know that this also seems like a little bit of a random question, but how do we know that somebody who's naked is not allowed to take the truma, separate the truma? Because truma has a bracha associated with it. So how do we know that he's not allowed to say a bracha while he's naked? That's how Rashi explains it, because it says, well, they should not see any nakedness amongst you, meaning to say, Amalei, meaning to say that Rashi says, Ervas Tibor, there can't be any speech when you're naked. And now the third question he asks him is really a rebuke. He says, Amalei Lav Koinu? He says, what are you doing here in the cemetery? You're a Kohen. Lav Koinu Mar, why are you here? So my time at Kohen Mar B'Beis HaKvaros. What are you standing in the cemetery for? So he says, so Eliyahu Navi, don't start up with Eliyahu Navi. That's the basic line. What does Eliyahu Navi say? He says, you think you're asking me a question? You obviously don't know anything about Taharos, because in the volume of Taharos, it says, the Tanya Reb Shimon Yochai Omer, in the Brayso, it says, Reb Shimon Yochai talk, that the graves of the idolaters don't transmit tent tuma, and so therefore I'm allowed to be in a cemetery. As it states, that tent sonit son marisi adam atem kriyim adam ve'enov dekhavim kriyim adam. Meaning to say, the idolaters don't transmit tent tuma, only tumas mag, only by touching them when they're dead. But if you're just standing over them, you're not going to become tamei. So Eliyahu Navi says to Rabbi Baravua, what are you asking me a basic question? Everybody knows that I'm allowed to be here. So Rabbi Baravua said, oops. Matzini says, I don't even know the first four volumes. Rashi says that refers to Moed, Noshim, Nezikin. These are all relevant. And Kodshim is also relevant because we have a concept that if you study the laws of the Beis HaMikdash, it's as though you brought a korban. But Taharos, Beshisa Matzina, am I going to know the other two, which are not relevant now with our Taharos and Zerayim? But Taharos is relevant because you need to know where a Kohen could stand. But anyway, he says he hasn't studied Taharos and Zerayim. Amarei v'amai. So he says that, hey, so Eliyahu Navi says to him, why haven't you studying? What's your excuse? Amarei dechikoli milsa. He says, I'm too poor. I have to make a living. I have to go out. They didn't have Zoom back then. I couldn't attend the shiurim on Zoom. I had my lunch break. I had no choice. So I'm too poor. So Dabre v'aylu Gan Eden. Eliyahu Navi takes him up to the Garden of Eden. Amroi pashuk limech. Says, stick out your coat. Safi shakol mehani tarfi. Go take up from these leaves. meaning you got these leaves from the Garden of Eden. How much do you think you could sell those on eBay for? Billions of dollars. I got a leaf from the Garden of Eden. So Sapa Shakal, he stuck out his coat and was taking it. When Rabbi Barbu was leaving, Shama de Ka'amar, he heard that they were saying about him, what a fool. Man Ka'achel Alme Karabba Baravua. He said, look at him. Who's destroying his world to come like Rabbi Baravu? I mean, say he's taking the leaves in this world, he's going to lose his flower in the world to come. So Nafat Shadinu, he took it and he threw it out. He decided not to take it. He shook it out. He shook out the leaves. So I feel achi nevertheless, when he brought basically it was he brought back his coat, and his coat had the smell on it. Sachat gam glima recha. His coat had absorbed the smell of the leaves. So Zabne was able to sell up a tracer alpha dinari and pagino chatan vase. He divided it up for 12,000. He sold it for 12,000 coins, and he gave it to his sons-in-law. Why did he give it to his sons-in-law? Thing like this, because his sons-in-law, he was supporting them while they were studying Torah. So he wanted them to continue studying Torah. Tan Rabbanan, it says in the Brisa. So now we go back to the question with the law of the concept of returning a mashkon. I just want to clarify that what type of mashkon are we talking about? The Gemara, it's very clear. We're not talking about a case where a guy comes to you and says, I want $1 million. You say, okay, give me security for your loan. So he gives you his Ferrari. No, that's not what we're talking about. The case that the Gemara is talking about here, there you don't have to return the mashkon at night. What we're talking about here is where you gave the person $1 million without a security. And now it came $1 million, the guy has to pay back the loan, but he doesn't have any money. So now you want to have the court order to take the security. So that type of security, if the guy can't afford it, you have to return it to him at night. So it says the Bryce of him ish anihu lo tishkaf ba'avoto. If he's a poor man and you take his security, you're not allowed to sleep in his garment. Ha'ashir, does that mean that if he's wealthy, shachiv? If he's meaning to say, does that mean if the man is wealthy, if the borrower is wealthy, then you're allowed to sleep in his garment that he gave to you? My comment, what is the Bryce saying? It's not possible that the lender is allowed to use the way Rashi explains. It's not possible that the lender is allowed to use the garment of the wealthy man because that's which he got as security because that's a type of interest because he gave him the money and he's also getting use of his garment. So that's interest. So that can't be allowed. So Amar Sheish Sachik Kamar V'imish Anihu, if he's a poor man, Lo Tishka V'avotu Etzlacha, don't go to sleep while you hold his garment as security. Ha'asher, but if he's a wealthy man, Shachiv V'avotu Etzlacha, go to sleep with his garment with you as security. So the Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan, Hamal Ves Chavero Eino Rishai. If somebody lends money to his friend, Eino Rishai Lamashkano, the Eino Chayev Lachziro. If a person lends money to his friend, he's not allowed to take the security, and he's not obligated to return the security, but over B'kol Hashem Asalo, when he violates all these prohibitions that we had said previously, we were discussing, you have to return the security, don't sleep with his security, and before the sun rises, you have to, or before the sun sets, you have to return it. So the Gemara says, what does this price even mean? Because it's not clear. This is what it means. Somebody lends money to his friend, he's not allowed to demand the security. But if he does get the security, he has to return it to him. And when it says he violates his prohibitions, that refers to a seifa. That refers to the next clause of the brisa. That if he took the security, he has to return it, and if he didn't return it, he's in violation of all these prohibitions. Rava says, no, we're going to explain the brisa in a different way. That's why Rav Shesha said it, but Rava says, I'll explain the brisa differently. Hachikamer, this is what it means. Hamalva es chavero eno rashayla mashkano. If you lend money to your friend, now how to seize the security. Even mishkano chayav lahachzero. And if you do take it, you have to return it to him. When do we say this? And this is what I spoke out a minute ago. When do we say this? Halacha, they have to return the security. Shemishkano shlo b'shas havasa. When you took the security, but it wasn't the moment of the loan, meaning to say it was when he hadn't paid you the money back. But if you took out the security right when you gave him the loan, that's not what the Torah is referring to. That's the conditions of the loan. Over because Hashem is alone, it says you're in violation of these prohibitions. That's outrageous. That's on the first cause. That if you take out the security, that if you take the security and you don't return it, you're in violation of the prohibitions. So Tani Rav Shizvi Kanmei de Rava. So Rav Shizvi taught this brisa in front of Rava. It says in the pasuk, if you take the security, ad bo hashemesh tishivenu, until the sun comes, you have to return it to him. What does this mean? Zo ksus lailo. This refers to the garment of night, meaning to say that it needs to be in the borrower's possession the whole day. And what does it mean? Ad bo hashemesh, meaning to say before the sun sets and the night comes, you have to return the garment to the borrower. Whereas the pasuk in Devarim, where it says Hashev tashivo asavot kivo hashemesh, where it says that you have to return the garment to him when the sun comes, that refers to, and so that he can sleep with his garment. This refers to ksus yom, that you have to return to him at night, the garment for the day. So Rava says to Rav Shizvi, I don't understand the way you interpret this brisa. According to this brisa, the lender is returning to him the garment for the day at night and the garment for the night at day. What's he going to do with the garment for the day and night? And the Lila what's he going to do for the garment at night during the day? So Rav Shizvi says, okay, Armoy Ismaya, should I just delete this brisa from my library? Should I delete it from my brain, from my memory? Rabbi says, no. This is what it means. Before the sun sets, excuse me, before the sun rises in the morning, you have to return it to him. This refers to the garment during the day, meaning to say before the sun rises in the morning, he needs his garment to go to work, to walk around and get breakfast. So that's why you return to him the garment of the day. And when it says Zoksu Slayu, when it says Hashev Teshivilo it says Bo Hashemesh Teshivenu Lo, when it says this idea, Hashev Tashiv Lo Asavot Kavo Hashemesh, that refers to Ksus Laila. The next pasuk from the Devarim that you have to give him before the sun sets at night, you have to give him his garment. That refers to the garment at night. Meaning to say that you let him wear it during the day, that he gave you security during the day, but at night he's going to need to go to sleep. So you give him his garment at nighttime for his security. Okay, that's the daf. We'll continue now, but I just will stop recording because now we're up to the daf for Shabbos. So let me just stop the recording.